In the spring of 1242, Zagreb survived one of the worst catastrophes in its entire history. After winning at the Battle of Mohi, a savage Mongol horde spent almost an entire year pillaging and raiding across the kingdom of Hungary, Croatia. And unfortunately, Zagreb was one of the towns that was burned to the ground. On November 16th that same year, the inhabitants of Zagreb's Gradec Hill received the Golden Bull, a special royal edict issued by King Bela IV, which was supposed to help them get back on their feet. In it, Bela ordered the construction of a new fortified settlement on Gradec and proclaimed it a free royal city. Besides a certain degree of autonomy, this status granted Gradec's inhabitants a set of special royal privileges, which will soon start attracting new settlers. With both locals and foreigners pouring in, the new town started developing into a real medieval economic powerhouse. In the last episode of the story of Zagreb, we saw the settlement on Kaptol flourish after the founding of the diocese. In this one, we'll follow Zagreb's growth in the late Middle Ages and find out why the Golden Bull was so crucial for its development. Let's begin with the next chapter of the story of Zagreb. During most of the Middle Ages in Europe, new settlements emerged and developed through predominantly spontaneous processes, which would most often result in organic urban forms, just like they did in the bishop settlement on Kaptol. However, during the 13th and 14th centuries, European rulers started strategically founding new settlements themselves in an effort to revive abandoned or devastated areas. Rooted in the Roman urban planning tradition, these settlements were often characterized by a high degree of urban order and organization. This was most apparent in their functional disposition and orthogonal grid layout, which enabled efficient division of land for taxing purposes. On the other hand, it was a fast and rational solution in a situation where both space and time were limited. As one of these settlements, Gradec followed the same principles. Gradec's plan featured a large open central square, with an orthogonal street network that enclosed 9 rectangular insulae. The insulae were divided into smaller plots or parcels of about 400 square meters, which were given out to each of the Gradec inhabitants in exchange for yearly tax. The center of the settlement was reserved for public buildings and shops, while the richer inhabitants tended to reside on its edges. This was probably because they preferred bigger and more isolated parcels, as well as the proximity of the city walls, which enabled better protection and quicker evacuation. The new stone walls defined the edges of the new settlement, and although its internal form was geometricized, the fortifications followed the natural shape of terrain. Gradec was bigger, higher, steeper, and therefore more defensible hill than Kaptol, while its plateau configuration enabled the city to be built on a relatively large and flat area. Even though the exact perimeter of the wall is still debated, it's generally thought that it encompassed the entire hill. It was between 5 and 6 meters tall and about 2 meters wide, with ramparts, 3 main gates, and multiple defensive towers that improved its defenses. Unfortunately, Gradec's fortifications didn't stand the test of time, and of all of these defensive structures, only the Lotoshchak Tower, the Stone Gate, and the Priest's Tower remain to this day. In the beginning, Gradec's structure was more reminiscent of a rural than an urban one. Most of the small houses were oriented perpendicularly to the street and placed on one side of the parcel to make way for a horse or a wagon. They were mostly made out of wood, and they had between 1 and 3 rooms, which were organized in a linear manner along an open porch or a closed hallway. The rest of the plot would be filled with barns, sties, wells, and other utilitarian buildings. The main building in the settlement was the newly built Church of St. Mark, which was located in its center and featured the same proportions as the main town square. Even though it was originally built as a Romanesque three-naved building, it got its first facelift after about a century, when it was altered in a Gothic style. Later reconstructions will make it one of Zagreb's most recognizable symbols, but in its early days, the church was quite modest. Another important building was the 14th century Angevin Royal Palace, which, according to the newest archaeological surveys, was probably located in the southwestern part of the city. Unfortunately, little else is known about this palace, so we can only speculate about both its size and its appearance. As a free royal city, the new settlement on Gradec enjoyed numerous special privileges in relation to other settlements within the Kingdom of Hungary, Croatia. These privileges were mostly legal and economic in nature, ranging from the freedom of movement and property rights to fewer tax obligations. Besides helping the existing population get back on their feet, these privileges were designed specifically to attract new settlers to the area, and it seems that they were quite successful. Some estimates say that Zagreb's population tripled in only 100 years, which was quite extraordinary for medieval times. A great historical source for this period is Zagreb's first ever census, made in 1368, which states that almost 3,000 people lived in the free city alone. However, not all of them lived inside the city walls. The administrative area of the free city encompassed the town's suburbia as well, or the settlement beneath the city. According to the census, there were 150 houses on the hill itself, and another 169 in the suburbia, which were divided between its two main streets, Šostarska and Lončarska Ves. These two streets were home to both local and foreign traders and craftsmen that came here during the 13th and 14th centuries. In fact, Šostarska Ves was named after the German word for a cobbler or a shoemaker, which denotes both the predominant profession and nationality of its inhabitants. The suburbia mostly stretched along the Medveščak Creek, which was no wonder considering water's integral role in many medieval industries. However, Medveščak was also the border between the free city and the bishop's town, and the right to use it will be one of the major causes for their disputes in the following centuries. While the free city on Gradec flourished throughout this period, the bishop's settlement on Kaptol struggled to keep up at times. The bishops couldn't afford to give out such privileges to their inhabitants, and the ones they could weren't as attractive as the royal ones, so new settlers found Kaptol generally less appealing than its neighbor. Despite that, the positive trends in the region and the proximity of such a strong economic entity as Gradec enabled it to grow and prosper as well. The most significant expansion of the original settlement happened at the beginning of the 14th century, when Bishop Augustin Kažotić gave some of Kaptol's land to his clergy. The canons settled just north of the cathedral, building their residences in a sequence that formed the front of the main Kaptol street. Further north, the cathedral's prebendaries built their own settlement somewhere around 1334, which is today known as the Nova Ves Street. Also, some monastic orders started settling in the town as well, building their own churches and residences across the settlement. Even though the bishop's settlement wasn't fortified with anything other than a wooden palisade for another 200 years, it didn't mean that its inhabitants were defenseless. By the king's orders, Kaptol's residents received a piece of land inside the newly built city on Gradec, as well as its northernmost defensive tower. Also, somewhere in the second half of the 13th century, either the king or one of the bishops started building the Medvedgrad fort. Located on a very favorable strategic position on the slopes of the Medvednica mountain, it was supposed to serve as the bishop's refuge in case of an attack. Even though it was primarily a defensive structure, it also contained the bishop's residence and a small octagonal chapel. When it was completed, its double stone walls and two large defensive towers made it one of the strongest fortifications in the wider city area. Zagreb's Golden Age, as this period is sometimes called, will last for about 100 years and end with the arrival of the Black Plague around the 1350s. During this period, both Gradec and capital flourished on all fronts and unequivocally established themselves as some of the most important economic and political entities in the entire region. However, the old town atop the capital hill still remained in the hands of the bishop, which meant that Zagreb was now split between two very close yet very different administrative entities. From that moment, the settlements on Capital and Gradec started their separate development and became rare examples of medieval twin cities. As time went by, their numerous differences and conflicting interests caused them to grow apart and consequently resulted in a fierce rivalry. Feeling constantly threatened by each other, the two towns will struggle to see beyond their pettiness and won't be able to find middle ground for hundreds of years. The beginning of the 15th century will see the rise of the Ottomans, which will shake the foundations of the entire continent. Soon, Zagreb will find itself at the edge of the Christian world, facing an unrelenting force that could mean its demise. How did it manage to survive? Watch it all in the new episodes of the story of Zagreb. Hello everyone, thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please consider liking, sharing and subscribing to the channel so you don't miss any new episodes of the story of Zagreb. Alongside this video, I am releasing the Medvedgrad fort as my first City Skylines asset. Of course, you'll be able to find it on the Steam Workshop, and you'll find the link in the description down below. That will be it for today. Play curiously, and I'll see you soon.